We are so excited to premiere our very first Stories of Hope podcast featuring Ben and Sarah Taplin. Their story is one of a kind, truly showing how against all odds, independent of background and experience, when it's the right time, God will bring two people together. I know you're going to love it. Please show us your support by subscribing, rating, and liking this very first episode. Ben and Sarah, thank you so much for coming today. I am psyched to hear your story. I think many people are really excited to hear it. And we're just going to jump right in. So Sarah, tell us a little bit about where you're from and how you grew up. And then Ben, we're going to bring the question back to you.
Sure. So I grew up in Princeton, New Jersey. My parents are both immigrants. My father's from Algeria, literally took a boat here when he was young. My mother's from Monaco, which is south of France. And
Wow.
they grew up very traditional, kiddish at home Friday nights, but not really strict Shomer Shabbos or Shomer, whatever, all the things. We went to a conservative Jewish shul growing up, and I loved it. I have only good things to say. Well,
mainly good things.
I have many good things to say about my childhood, my upbringing. My Jewish experience was extremely positive. And I have an older brother. He's a Baal Tshuva too, but we can get into that later.
Oh, wow. That's so interesting. I'm excited to hear about that.
Yeah.
There's only two of them and they're both Bali Chuba.
Yeah. My parents were like, what did we do?
Yeah, I was going to say that. Wow. Okay. So you grew up in Princeton, traditional.
Yeah. I went to public school my whole life. I went to Hebrew school 3 times a week, after public school.
Did you like it?
Hebrew school, I loved it. Had the best group of girlfriends. All the teachers loved us. Did I pay attention? I don't really think so, but I just loved, again, my Jewish experience was so positive. I loved singing the songs and learning the prayers, even though I had no idea what they meant. And I didn't even realize we were talking to Hashem. I was just kind of this is what we sing and it's really fun. I really loved it.
Okay. That's really beautiful. Wow. Ben, what about you?
So I grew up in Lakewood. Pretty average Lakewood kid. My father grew up in Lakewood as well. My grandfather is a big rabbi there. So I grew up pretty yeshivish, I would say. But average for us growing up, wouldn't have known anything different.
Mm-hmm.
Towards the end of elementary school, early high school is when my challenges started in that department. I wasn't a bad kid per se, but the system itself didn't work for me. I wasn't a kid that enjoyed being in a box and this is the way it is type of kid. So that's where, I started to explore a little bit. Did a bunch of high schools. Then I went off to Israel. But overall, was a fun kid.
Wow. Yeah. So Ben's casually saying I didn't sing songs with as much happiness as Sarah did, but I figured out what worked for me and tried to enjoy the ride, even though it may not have been easy along the way.
I don't think it took me a long time to figure that part out. It wasn't a simple road.
Yeah. It's hard. It's hard to be, it's hard when you're supposed to be in a box and, you're just a parachute. So you're never going to fit in the box. It's hard to be surrounded by that. But I do believe that it's not the quiet people that create change.
Yeah. But Lakewood was also a lot smaller back then. It was a very different Lakewood than what people compare it to today. It was much more intimate. Most people knew each other or knew of that person or of that family. And today, obviously, it's exploded into the new 5 towns.
Right.
Literally. But it was just different back then. And my parents are amazing people. But I think the society in the Lakewood, just the whole atmosphere of Lakewood was troubling for me and didn't work for me. Worked for, I would say, most people. But there's a sliver of society which it didn't work for. And I definitely was in that box. But it took time to unravel. It wasn't just a flip of a switch.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure. Okay, so now you're in, let's say you just finished, you said you were in Israel. So you're in Israel. You're how old, I guess, 18, 19. Where were you at 18, 19?
Oh, I was going off to my dream school, Syracuse University. I was in a sorority. I was in a Jewish a cappella group.
Called Oikapella.
Called Oikapella.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah, it was really funny. We sang for Matisyahu, actually.
Oh, you guys are pretty legit.
Yeah. No, I loved my Syracuse days, like absolutely loved. And I mean, I think the extent of my Judaism in school was like I was very involved in Hillel, and like sometimes I'd go to Chabad.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, that was pretty much it. And all my friends knew, like, oh, Sarah's like really Jewish, which I don't really know what that meant because like I didn't keep anything. But like on Rosh Hashanah, I'd be like, it's Rosh Hashanah. Like we're going to the service. And my friends all thought that was like so like from.
Yeah.
They were like, whoa, that's so crazy. Like you care about that when you're away from your parents. And I really like always cared. But I just wasn't very like, I wasn't very observant. I wasn't really keeping much. But my Syracuse days, that's 18 to 21. I was in school. Loved those days.
Okay. And how old were you when you started dating?
So I would like to go a little bit back. I was a fun kid, enjoyed my Israel experience, was there for a year and a half, started off in TJ, bounced around all over the country, and then was in H for a while. Definitely explored a lot. When I came back to America, I was going to go off to college. I was back home in Lakewood for a little bit, but then I got sick. I had a lung infection, and a lot of people know that part of my life, but it definitely was a domino effect, and I was extremely, extremely sick for many, many years. So I wasn't dating for a while. I was very involved in a bunch of organizations, was definitely friends with a lot of girls, but there was no dating for me for till
How old were you when you met me?
Yeah. No, but I wasn't,
yeah.
I didn't date for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And maybe can you share for a few minutes with anyone who doesn't know your story? Can you share it with us for a few minutes? I know you can't really put it in a spark note.
Yeah.
But maybe
that's a podcast for itself.
It
but
is.
Very quickly, I had a lung infection, which aspirated. You have 4 lobes, and my lower left lobe was where the infection was, and it exploded and collapsed my lungs and ended up in a coma for 2.5 months. Then I was also on ECMO for 7 weeks, and then I was in the hospital for a total of 6 months, and then needed to learn how to walk again and breathe again, and just the recovery process that took many, many years. I still have those challenges. I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit, but that's the very, very concise part of that.
Wow. And I think that's actually how I heard of you, because I met you when you came to my house. You were friends with Shia Baron, my stepbrother.
Yes.
And he's like, this is the guy that woke up from the coma. Hey, this is Ben Taplin. You know Ben. And I didn't know you, but I was like, shoot, I'm supposed to know him. So I said, yeah, I know Ben. And your reputation is so positive amidst the challenges that you've been through. And you leave a light wherever you go. And I see that Sarah has a lot of light too. So
Thank you.
Together, you're basically a disco ball, guys.
It's all the show. I'm just kidding.
Shia was actually in my class.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, Waterbury.
Wow. Shout out to Shia Baron.
Love that guy.
So
great football player, by the way.
Oh.
Yeah, great linebacker. Give him a little bit of
give him a little bit of credit there. So thank you for sharing your story and where you were at. So Sarah, what was dating like for you?
So in the secular world, like when a frum person says, and this is, I'm not making fun in any way, it's just a completely different culture. When a frum person says they're 26 and they're upset they're not married, it's almost laughable. It's like, what? Your life just started? And that it's we're getting to a point now in the non-frum world, I'd say, that even getting married before like 28, you're like considered a child bride. Like it's kind of, it's, I don't know. It's so different now that I'm in this world. But my perspective on dating when I was 18, 19, 20. It was very like, I'm so young. Like, how could I even make such a big choice at an age like this? So I wasn't in the headspace at all of like, I'm looking for my husband. That was not at all what I was. Very much like, I'm in college, and I definitely am the type to gravitate towards a relationship. I'm very like, I mean, I have a lot of close friends and I enjoy deep connections. So I wasn't the type to just like bounce around and date whoever. So, if someone presented themselves to me and I was like, oh, this is someone I would date, I would be interested. But I never even considered getting married before living with somebody. I never thought that I would do that. And I thought that I would be dating for 5 years before I got married. So again, I was a completely different headspace.
Yeah.
And then I would say after college, I dated pretty seriously. I was looking, but again, not really for marriage. It was more like I'm looking for a boyfriend, someone I could date for a long, long time. And then once I started entering, how to say this? Once I started like learning a little bit more and connecting more to my values and becoming a little bit more observant, I feel that my priorities shifted. And I would say around 25 is when I started saying like, okay, now I'm looking for my husband. But again, I didn't feel old. I didn't at all. If I would ever say like, I'm never going to find someone, my friends would laugh at me. They'd be like, you're 25. Like, what are you talking about? You're a baby. Even as I was walking down the aisle, I'm like, I'm a child bride. I was 27. So it's just completely different like perspective. Yeah.
For sure. And I do feel like there's so much to learn from the entire world.
Yeah.
And I'm sort of wondering if you could share a little bit of what you think the religious world might be able to gain from someone who grew up in the secular world where that chapter of life was filled with a lot of positivity, a lot of focus on development and growth, and maybe experience.
Obviously, I think there are pros and cons to everything. So I don't want to glamorize it at all because I left it. So obviously, I'm not here to say like everything's perfect about that part of that way of thinking. But I do think there is beauty in recognizing that, at 18, 19, we are just starting to learn about ourselves in a more independent way. Maybe you're leaving home for the first time, or I don't know, maybe you went to Israel and you've never been away from home for that long. And for me, going to Syracuse college was really my time to be away from my parents for an extended period of time for the first time in my life. Like I went to summer camp, but this was really my time. So I viewed those 4 years as like, this is me gaining independence. And I thought, and I still think that it's really incredible that I got to experience life in my own way and kind of like fail a little bit and see what I did like and what I didn't like. And that could mean for anything, like hobbies or even studies. I didn't, in high school, you're kind of like confined to this is what your schedule is and this is what you're told to do. When you're past 18, I think there's a little bit more freedom in the secular world of like, what do you want to study? What do you want to do as a career? Who do you want to date? And that freedom allowed me to learn about myself, that by the time I actually started seriously dating, I really knew what I was looking for. I felt that at that point, I was like, I know myself very well. And I find a lot of value in that. But again, I also see the value in growing with somebody. So I don't think that it's like all bad on one side and all good on the other. I think there's beauty to both sides. But personally for me, like I'm very happy that I was able to learn myself and kind of fail a lot, because I would have never gotten to Ben if I didn't have those years of like exploration and getting to know myself. Does that make sense?
I think that was very beautifully said.
Oh, thank you.
That was very beautifully said. And Ben, when she was 25, how old were you?
I'm a year older, so 26.
Okay, so you were 26. So where were you at 26 in your stage of, were you looking to date? Were you still recovering? Were you having difficulties dating? What was that like for you?
So I don't know if I ever shared this publicly. I've shared this
Ooh.
with some friends of mine privately. But I'm a little fuzzy with the years, but for me, so I grew up in Lakewood, but after I was sick for around a year and a half, I moved to Brooklyn to a friend of mine's house. His name is David Schwartz. A little shout out for you. I love you, man. He really was an incredible, he was like a brother to me. Him, his father, his stepmother, and Brooklyn was like the social scene at the time. I had done Kids of Courage and Camp Simcha, and everybody was there. There was always stuff going on. And that really helped me and nurtured me back to society. And it was pretty incredible. And then life moves on. Everybody gets a little older. People started getting married. And I was sort of the guy left behind. And, I was still getting better. And I still had, my reservations about moving on to the next steps. I didn't feel like, how am I going to be a father if I'm on oxygen? Or how am I going to be a father if I can't carry things? Or, just my challenges that really held me back. And I was, getting better. I was doing my physical therapy, and time is the biggest healer of all. And at a certain point, I was in Florida with my father, and he said to me, and just side point, my parents really stayed out of like pressuring me about marriage. They never bothered me about it. They were just supportive, just helping me get to where I needed to get to. But at that specific time, my father said to me, like, why are you not getting married? Like what's stopping you? And I told him a couple of my reservations, and he really did a good job at, saying whatever you need, we're here for you.
Wow.
But you gotta move on to the next step. And I always tell people, you can't just say that if you don't have the background of always being there for that person. And I can't say I'm the best one at giving other people reassurance, but my father in that moment really hit a chord for me. And I said, okay. And that was like the mental switch for me about being able to move to the next phase. I felt that my father had my back, and I knew my mother always did. So from then on, I was able to start to move into the place of like, okay, I'll be able to date. For me, dating was pretty simple. I was dating for marriage. I wasn't dating for, just to date. I didn't know exactly what I wanted, and I was friends with the full gambit of people from completely secular, non-Jewish to very, very frum. So I didn't know what exactly I needed, and I didn't date that much, but I definitely dated a very colorful bunch of people till I figured it out.
Really?
Yeah.
You dated a colorful bunch?
It was. It's funny.
You dated like 2 people before.
I don't really talk about it. I don't.
What the heck? Let's get into this.
No, I don't. For me, it's like I don't really talk about like things that I don't feel are relevant. And
say names.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
I'm totally kidding.
But I was friends with a lot of girls, but I did date a little bit. But it took me a little bit of time to figure out what was important. And I'm sure we'll get into this, but it happened completely natural with us. Like it wasn't.
Yeah.
Do you want to share?
Are we at that point? I don't know.
So yeah, bring us there.
Okay. I also don't know exact ages. Like I said, 25, but
yeah,
there definitely was a shift for me where I started being like, okay, I want to be more serious and intentional with my dating.
And were you religious yet?
So I think if I remember correctly, it aligned with at the same time that I started learning. So it's a long story, but I was in this Facebook group of Jewish girls who liked a podcast called The Toast. And like, that podcast? Yeah, and The Good Guys Best Podcast. Yeah. So I was a huge fan at the time. It was called The Morning Toast. And I was in a Facebook group called The Challah Toasters. And this is literally Jewish girls who like a podcast that has nothing to do with Judaism. I mean, they're proud Jews, but whatever. And a girl named Odelia posted in the Facebook group saying, I'm starting a weekly shiur, and, it's open to all girls. Please come. And I was at a point in my life that I'm not going to delve into like everything that happened between 23, 24.
Yeah.
But I felt a little lost. I was extremely disconnected from my Judaism. Like let's just rewind really quickly. My Judaism has always been such a strong part of me. again, I grew up with very positive Jewish experiences. So it was always like I kind of wanted more of it. I loved it. My summer camp was the quintessential conservative camp, Camp Ramah. I adored it. We davened 3 times a day, like everybody. I loved
Very
it.
from.
No, honestly, it was so from. Like I loved it. I learned how to bench there. I learned how to daven there. Like I felt so connected. I remember every night we said Shema, and I would have these like epiphanies, like wow, like I love this so much. And but then I would go back to public school, and I would just kind of like drop it.
Yeah.
And then I went to Syracuse, and there was not really much, happening for me in the Jewish space. And then I graduated, and I felt extremely disconnected. I had a lot of Jewish friends, but I was not really like doing anything. You know what's crazy? I didn't even know people my age kept Shabbos in New York City. I thought like older families did. I didn't understand people my age were even doing that. So this girl posted in the Facebook group, and I was like, yes, like, oh my gosh, I need some Torah in my life. Like, I'm going to go. And I decided to go, and it's a long story, but I made my best friends in this class, and I went almost every single Wednesday for about 2 years until COVID hit. And that was around the time where I started shifting my perspective in dating from I'm dating to have a boyfriend to I'm dating for marriage. And I became much more intentional with my dating. But again, at this, for years, I was learning and I was very inspired, but I wasn't like keeping anything. I was just like, yes, like these are the values I align with. This feels right for my soul. And I'll do it later. Like when I'm an adult, when I'm a parent, I'll keep Shabbos. But it wasn't something that I thought would ever be realistic for my life at the time. I had no friends that kept Shabbos, like zero.
Well,
zero. And except for the one girl who started the class. And I loved her, but she lives in Queens. I was like, I'm not moving to Queens.
She just got married, actually.
She just got married, yeah.
Wow.
Anyway, so all of this to say was I started learning, and then COVID hit, and that really like catapulted me. I thought for sure that first Shabbos of COVID, I'm like, I'm going to keep Shabbos, and Mashiach is going to come this Shabbos. Because I was like, I'm going to keep it, and then it's going to happen. It didn't happen. Spoiler alert.
They do teach you that in kindergarten. Like, this mitzvah is going to do it. And
I really thought, I was like, it's COVID, like Hashem's sending us, whatever. We all know the story. Anyway, I had some ups and downs. It wasn't just like started keeping Shabbos, COVID, and then it was a straight linear path. There were moments where I stopped because I really didn't have a community. And then there were times where I was really inspired and I kept doing it.
And when you kept it, you were keeping it by yourself?
I was quarantined with my friend and whatever. I was quarantined with a few people. And in that group, I was doing it pretty much alone. Wow. But I thought to myself, you know what? Like, where am I supposed to be right now? Like, my mom also started keeping it then. But again, we both were like in and out.
I think just to jump in for one second.
Yeah, so I could go on for a long time. So please.
And Bali Tshuva could talk about this a lot more, but I think the sense of community, people don't realize how powerful that is. Right.
Like I started keeping it, but after a while it kind of fizzles out when you're doing it alone. You have no one to keep Shabbos with. I didn't know any of the halachas. Like I was just like, okay, don't flip the light switch, don't cook, and light Shabbos candles and keep my phone off. But I didn't really know anything other than that. And then this is kind of where we get to Ben. I want to emphasize, like, my relationship with Hashem has always been there. This isn't something that just like 2020 just came to be. It was really for a long time. I was cultivating this. I had it in me for my whole life. And then when I started learning, it's really when it started coming out more.
Yeah.
And then 2021, I was still dating secular guys. Every single date was worse than the one before. Like, they all disappointed me. I remember going on a date with someone, and on Hinge, it said Jewish. And then we got to the date. He's like, well, yeah, my dad's Jewish. I was like, oh my gosh.
No.
Like, you gotta be kidding me. It just was not working out because every date I'm going on, I'm like, what's your relationship with Hashem like? And they're like, huh? Like, I don't know what you're talking about. And I was getting frustrated because I was like, I feel like my values aren't here, but what I'm observing is over here, and they're just not aligning. And then I just had this epiphany one day. It sounds like such a nice little story, but obviously there were lots of bumps along the way. But I had an epiphany, like, I can't just keep dating these people whose values don't align with mine, but the people whose values align with mine, I'm not like holding where they're holding. And I just knew. I was like, I know that if I give to Hashem, Hashem's going to give to me. And I know that's not really how the world works. Like, I know it's not so simple. Like, oh, I'm going to keep this and Hashem's going to give me this. Like, I know it doesn't work that way, but I just knew in my heart, like, this is what I have to do in order for me to properly search for my person, because I can't look for my person if I'm not living out the values that I'm feeling. So I was like, okay, this summer, like, I'm really going to start keeping things legitimately.
Wow.
And I literally met Ben right away. And let's just say when we first met, he's like, okay, she's cute, she's fun, but like, she's not from, like, let's be real.
Well, let's hear Ben's
Yeah, let's hear
version.
it.
So Ben,
Thank
when
you.
did you meet Sarah? And Sarah, thank you so much for sharing all of that. It's beautiful to hear your enthusiasm towards Judaism and how you just knew in your blood and your neshama knew, like, this is what I want. And I think so many people can relate to dating, to wanting a certain lifestyle, but they are not practicing at that level.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes a lot of self-awareness to notice, oh, I'm attracting the wrong person because I'm not where I want to be.
Right.
And I'm not the person that I want to marry.
Right.
It takes a lot of self-awareness. And in your case, it's just fascinating that you were so enthusiastic about coming closer to God and Judaism that you just knew it was what you had to do. And now I am so excited to hear when Ben met you and what was going on in his head.
Yeah, let's hear it, Ben.
All right.
What did you think of me?
So I'm not sure. You know the dates a lot better than I do.
It was like mid-April, 2021.
So we met at a Shabbos Kiddush, and I just want to take it back for a second because I think this is important, especially for singles and Bali Tshuva and for dating in general. Community is crucial. It's something that a lot of people take for granted, especially growing up in the frum world. But Sarah and I have discussed this. The frum world only works for single people up to a certain age.
Correct.
And I'm sure you could delve into this a lot better than
Correct.
I could. But I think that once you hit a certain age and you're living at home or you're living in a community that's centered around just families, it makes it very, very difficult. Singles have to live around other singles, around other young couples. And I think it was so important for Sarah to be able to live amongst, people who are like-minded. And
right. Just to add on, when I was becoming frum, I was surrounded by Bali Tshuva on the Upper East Side. I didn't live in like a frum community. I lived in, we have a Chabad rabbi, and there was like a group of us all becoming frum together. Again, this sounds very like a fancy, nice story, but there were a lot of hurdles. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's the environment in which I was surrounded by people in their late 20s and 30s, also single and also becoming frum. So it was great environment for me.
And our rabbi there is also an incredible person, Rabbi Yeh. But for me, I was living in Flatbush still at the time, but I had a bunch of good friends who lived on the Upper East Side. So I would come there pretty often for Shabbos. And I was staying by a friend, and he's like, you want to come with me? We're going to this Kiddush Shabbos day. I said, sure, why not? I wasn't busy, so sure. So we go there. Again, no agendas, wasn't trying to meet anybody, just wanted to have a good time. I'm sitting there. My feet were up on the couch. I was just chilling. Shoes off, chilling with a bunch of people, girls and guys. And Sarah was there. I don't think I met her right away. I was talking to a bunch of people, but our friend Ethan Stein, and Sarah was talking about earlier about how he's always looking out for her podcast. So him and I knew each other a little before. So he knew that I was sick and I had a story. So he's like, why don't you two meet?
Oh, and with the intention of maybe she could feature you on her podcast.
Exactly.
Yes.
No.
Which I don't do anymore. But at the time, it was like a mental health podcast. And he was like, Ben should be a guest.
Yeah. So that's really, thought she was cool, thought she was fun. But at that time, I think I asked about her right afterwards.
Yeah, that's the part that you got to include.
That's fine. But found out she wasn't Shomer Shabbos. And again, at that time, like I said, I was dating a pretty wide range of girls, but I had my hard lines. And one of them was Shabbos. And that wasn't something I was willing to negotiate on. So it's like, great. But, moving on. Fun girl, I could chill with her. We could be friends, but at that point.
I was like chetzi keeping. This was my journey of making my way towards keeping fully. But I wasn't like, it's hard.
Yeah,
it's hard to
of
turn your phone
course.
off for 25 hours.
Of course.
So I guess that's where, and then we met again around a month later. Again, I'm not great with the dates.
That's okay.
But we met a month later. We had a nice long conversation. After that, I got her number after Shabbos. But we were friendly, I would say. And then Ethan Stein realized that there was something between us. He started to, let's just say, push it a lot more.
Yeah.
But I was still skeptical because I didn't think she was religious. And then the rabbi had done a 400 person huge Shabbos. And that Friday night, we had a pretty long talk.
That was the third time we met in person. And I knew there was something between us. Like there was a spark. But I mean, it was as Ben said, we were just friendly. It's not like it was this romantic thing. It was like, hi, good to see you,
And we had a pretty long, deep talk. And after that, I felt like, okay, she wants, because for me personally, if somebody's on a journey, you don't know where that journey is going to go to.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't want somebody who, okay, right now it's fun and enjoyable to keep Shabbos, but 10 minutes later, I'm out. And that wasn't something that I wanted to invest my time in. I wanted somebody who this is a priority to them. This is something that they value. This is something that they want to do for the rest of their life. Again, I didn't feel at the time I had a huge amount of a laundry list of items that I wanted, but that was one of them for me. And I felt pretty confident after that Friday night meal. So Sunday morning, I called her up. Actually, she didn't answer the first time, so I sent her a text. and then I called her back and I said, I want to take you out. It's funny, actually. I say this over. For guys, they'll appreciate this. I was pretty confident that she was going to say yes. But for some reason, I was still so nervous. And for me, I think that even that 5% level of rejection, it got me so nervous. And I just want to, since this is a podcast about stories of hope and dating, I think that, and I tell this over to girls all the time, girls expect guys to come over to them and be the one to ask them out. But sometimes girls don't realize that the way that they answer could make or break a guy's confidence. And so many guys, even if it's a guy that you're so not interested in, and he's just totally not for you, and you know that for whatever reason, be nice to him because he might have mustered up so much confidence to ask you out. And by the way you respond to him could change everything. And I have to give it to Sarah. The way that she responded to me, I was like I was like, love it.
Well, I was excited.
And the next thing, if I could just say one more thing, what I learned was if you're going to ask a girl out, don't ask her for 2 weeks from now. I was like, what are you doing tomorrow? Right away. It wasn't a game for me. It was, if I'm doing this, there's a reason. I'm in it for marriage. It was Sunday. We went out Monday.
Yeah. And then at the end of the date on Monday, he's like, what are you doing on Wednesday? Like some girls look at that as like, oh, he's so clingy. Like, why is he obsessed with me? I was like, yes, he wants to get married. Like, I want to get married. He wants to get married. Like, exactly. We're trying to see if we're not here to play games. I really liked that.
Yeah. And I want to expand on something you mentioned because it's so important. I do find that for some reason, and I wonder how you both feel about it, there can be unspoken agreements and rules that when it comes to dating, it's okay if people get hurt because every person has to look out for themselves. And I think our full-time job is always to be a good person, is always to be thoughtful, is always to be sensitive. Yes, every person has to do what's best for them, but how are you going to go about that? If you're going to say no to someone, are you going to be very cold and not provide context that could be comforting? Are you going to, like you said, be rude and maybe not compassionate, thinking of how difficult it must have been for them to come up to you? Are you going to laugh and then repeat it over to someone else, mocking this person? I think that it really can bring out the worst in people.
Right.
And I do want to encourage audience members listening to know that we don't have a day off when it comes to kindness and compassion.
Mhm.
And there should be no reason why in dating it's any different. That actually is even more sensitive and even more vulnerable. And a matchmaker, a parent, a sibling, a friend, anyone that's involved should exercise even more cautious instead of, well, this is how it is. So,
Mhm.
Yeah, I think people should always try to be the best they can. Look, we're all humans. People, we love blaming everybody but ourselves. I do it too. I am far from perfect. But I'm not taking guys completely off the hook. This is just one aspect in which I think that I felt it. And I was pretty confident that she was going to say yes. And I still felt nervous that there's even a small element of rejection. And I've seen this happen with girls where they're like, why don't guys come over? Well, if you burn every guy, then, and it could be a different girl who burnt the guy. And now you're at loss because of that. So look, it's something that I think people need to be sensitive about. Guys definitely have their issues. People like to blame shadchanim. I think a lot of them really work hard. It doesn't have to be like somebody who's just a shadchan. It could be even another person suggesting not necessarily a shadchan. People like to put on blame everybody but themselves.
Right.
So we all do it, but I think that if we could all be a little bit more sensitive when it comes to this, it would be better. And something that I've experienced. So
yeah. And do you think in a social setting where there's a bunch of guys and girls and people are trying to meet, do you think a girl should go up to a guy if she's interested?
So my wife is more of the opinion where the guy should go over to the girl, and I did that, and I think that girls should.
I was pretty forward with you. Like, I feel like that Friday night that we chatted.
Yeah, but you didn't ask me out.
I didn't ask you out,
She
but
wouldn't ask out.
I was like looking to talk to you that night.
Right, but you still didn't. You wouldn't make the move to ask the guy out.
Right. No, and that's not what I mean. Just
Okay,
to
so-
go up to them. To
Oh yeah,
start
for sure.
conversation.
I think that's great. And if you're the type of girl who's more traditional, try to get a guy to do it. We were just at an event recently where a girl was interested in a guy, and she came over to me and my wife, and I went over to the guy and sort of segued them into so that they could speak in hopefully a decently natural way.
Mhm.
I think for sure. I think people can't expect everybody to come to them. And at some point, if you're interested in somebody, do something about it. Whatever that something is, but do something.
I also think sometimes these events where there's a lot of singles in a room, I know from my perspective, for many years, even just like at bars, because, that's how I used to meet people before I was from, it was just like, oh, why is no one coming up to me? And I don't think I realized that it's not so easy when you're in like a big group of girls to just walk up to one girl and say, do you want to go out? Like, I was like, it's so simple. Like, they just need to come up to us and ask us out. But not only,
It's intimidating for the guy.
You lose, like, it's a very vulnerable thing
Yeah.
to put yourself out there. And as Ben said, I mean, you're risking rejection and it's scary for the girl or the guy. So I think people forget, like, it's not so easy. Just, they might think, you might see someone in a room and say, oh, I'm interested. But it's not immediately going to translate to that person's just going to walk up to you and let you know that they're interested.
Right.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
I think sometimes girls walk away from these events like no one was interested in me. Like, how do you know that? They could have just been nervous.
Yeah. So it sounds like both parties really need to take responsibility and accountability instead of always saying, well, it's their fault.
Mhm.
It's their fault.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I personally am a big fan of events. Just don't have to call them singles events, but for example, my friends threw a huge birthday party for me many years ago, and there were probably 500 people there. I would say decently even guys and girls, and somebody got married. There were definitely people dated,
Wow.
but for sure, I know at least one couple that got married because of that event. And I'm a big fan of throwing people in a room, and you never know what's going to come of it. I don't think those two people, they're coming from completely different worlds, would have met. So I am a big fan of that. I do get for girls, they have to get dressed up, and it's emotionally draining and it's not easy. But I do think that by going and putting yourself in a big room with people, your chances are just higher. You're out there, people think about you, you're on people's minds, and you're also having a fun night out. For people who are just introverts, I want to be at home. It's definitely going to be harder in this
Right.
department.
Yeah, I also think that something that Ben and I can't really speak to as well is like the shotgun game, because
We didn't do it.
we both never had resumes. So, and I don't mean that to say in like a egotistical way. Like I didn't even know what a resume was until after I met Ben.
Mm-hmm.
And Ben,
Never
I
had.
mean, it just wasn't, we're just not those types of people. And so that's kind of why we really, you know, we push the get out there, meet people naturally. But I know that's not for everyone. And I know we do have to
Sure.
acknowledge that some people aren't so comfortable with,
True.
you know, mixed events or
And maybe as you said it, maybe it's a moment where friends who are married, couples who are married, can ask themselves like, hey, maybe for Shabbos we can invite different people over. So like
Sure.
you said, it's not an event, but it's a social
Mhm.
setting. Hey, we're having dinner. Why don't we also invite our single friends?
Exactly.
Hey, we're having
Yeah.
a party for one of our kids. Maybe we'll extend and expand
right.
because no one knows what opportunities they can be a part of, how much more comfortable they can make a circumstance if they can introduce two people. It's a very thoughtful way to think about how to be helpful.
We really thought our wedding was going to be like the matchmaking night of the century.
I
thought-
think a lot. I'm sure people went out. I am
Like
like before our
positive.
wedding, we were like, we need everyone to meet tonight. Like we really had high hopes, but didn't pan out the way we wanted.
don't know. I really believe you never know
The
what
threads
comes
could
out.
still be in action.
Yeah, we've.
I
no
agree
con-
with you though. I'm constantly, I have yet to make like a match, but I'm constantly
She's amazing.
thinking, no, I'm not. I have
Sure.
not made a match, but I am constantly thinking to myself, like, who can we invite? Who can we just get in a room together on Shabbos? Or I just, that's how we met. And I was so natural that I just I would love to help any of my friends
That's
or even
amazing.
not friends. A girl at the OL event last week came up to me and was like, hey, we've never met, but like my friend needs someone. Do you know anyone? I'm like, absolutely. Like, give me your number.
That's so sweet.
No,
Yeah.
I'm not even saying that to like get credit. I just think like we should all be in the camp of trying to help. I don't
Yeah.
know. That's just,
I
even
agree.
if you're single, like if you go out with someone, I know this might be weird, but if you go out with someone and he's not for you, like who is he for then?
It's not weird at all.
I don't know.
100%.
And that goes back to being nice, because if you're on a date with somebody, it's not working, but you end amicably and you think for that person, you never know. Maybe it's for somebody that's close in your circle, but just wasn't for you.
Right.
So you really, we both are huge proponents of it. You
Yeah.
just never know.
And when you finally reached out to Sarah, was she keeping Shabbos at that point?
Yes. Yeah. So
2 weeks.
yeah. But at that Shabbos, that Friday night meal, that's when I felt really confident. And like, it wasn't just a phase, but I did want to explore it more. So we went out. In the beginning, I was a little bit more cautious, but the way she responded to me, she made me feel comfortable. I'll just say one thing from our first date, just to flip it around.
Yeah.
She said to me, like, I don't understand. Why are you dating me? You know so many girls. You were in the frum world your whole life. Why would you date me? And I said, it's precisely because you chose this for yourself. So that was something that I realized that I needed. And I don't know if I would have necessarily known that earlier on. I didn't have to go through what Sarah had to go through, but I went through my own journey. And because she went through her journey, that helped me connect to hers. And I think that her choosing to be religious, for me personally, I was friends with a lot of what you'd call burnt out people from the system, and a lot of, unfortunately, people, and it's their stories, a lot of people had trouble with SNES or other things, and they were very negative about it and always turned me off. Even if you're not doing it, just to be negative about it and like forced to, like, for example, my parents are from her, and to have a girl come to my parents' house just not dressed appropriately wasn't something I was interested in. And there were girls who would tell me, this is who I am, that's what I want to do, like, and that just always turned me off. And when I found the girl who was sensitive about it and chose this for herself, a light bulb went off. I was like, I like that. That's something I want in a wife. So her choosing it and being interested in it because she wants it, not because anybody forced her, is exactly what I wanted.
Hmm.
Do you mind if I make 2 points?
Please.
Okay. The first point I want to make, and this is just a little disclaimer, is I know I said that we started dating when I had just started keeping Shabbos, but really, you have to realize this was like years in the making for me. This wasn't just like I woke up and I was like, okay, it's time. I mean, this was years of me learning and toying with like, do I keep it? Do I not? Like, it was a long journey. So by the time I started keeping it, I was really like, okay, this is for sure the life that I want, and I'm doing it. That took a long time to get to, and I had a lot of difficulty with a lot of my friends. People don't even realize the experience that Bali Tshuva have to go through.
Sure.
Of like, I said I had zero shot of keeping friends. So you can imagine how hard all my friends, you know, they had a very difficult time with me taking on this lifestyle. It was a very bumpy road. But by the time we started dating, I was extremely confident and like, this is the lifestyle that I know that I want. And the other point I wanted to make was that I think both Ben and I, in hindsight, we did not know really. I knew what I was looking for values-wise, but if you told me that I would have married someone from Lakewood who had this journey, I mean, do you think I would ever, like my Syracuse self, I would ever imagine my life ending up in this way? And I actually read a book shortly before we started dating called, it sounds crazy, but it's like a great book. It's called How to Not Die Alone. And it's written by this woman named Logan. She did like behavioral science at Harvard, and she worked, I think, at Google. And then now she's the relationship coach at Hinge. I think that's what she still does. But point is, in the book, she talks a lot about how you really need to expand your thinking in, you know, what are your real deal breakers? And for me, I had spent so many years dating what I thought I was looking for. And when Ben came around, I don't mean this in a mean way. Like I really was like, okay, I'm going out of my comfort zone here. Like this is not someone I ever would have anticipated going for. He wears
sorority house girl to Lakewood
literally
boy.
like he wears it sits out. Like my friends thought I was nuts. They're like, this is crazy. But I just want to emphasize, it's all about the qualities you're looking for. And sometimes the person for you is not, they don't look the way you expected them to look. It's not, maybe the picture isn't what you envisioned, but what are the qualities you're looking for? And I was looking for qualities in a certain level of self-awareness, someone who's worked on, and I know Ben was looking for that as well. And, you know, if we disagreed on something, what was his reaction going to be? Was he going to get angry and like raise his voice? Or was he going to remain calm? I'm a very anxious person, and Ben is not anxious. And so originally I thought maybe I should be with someone who's anxious because we could just spiral together. But really, the fact that Ben's not anxious is exactly what I needed. And so again, maybe the picture isn't what I envisioned for myself, but once I was really intentional about the qualities that I was looking for and I saw them in Ben, a lot of people in my life, it took them a long time to get on board. I mean,
what actually, I'm really curious to know if you're still in touch with your community or friends who are still secular. What has their reaction been to you marrying Ben?
That is a loaded question.
That's a great question.
That's a great question and a loaded question. And I tend to talk a lot if you couldn't tell. So I'm going to try and keep the answer
Everything you have
short.
to say is beautiful. Let's say for this answer, like we'll say 3 minutes.
Yeah. She's trying to keep it. I appreciate that. It was very, very, very difficult. And the response I got pretty much immediately from all of my friends was, he's not for you, from everyone.
Wow.
And actually all of the Bali Tshuva friends I had in my community on the Upper East Side were like, we love Ben. This is such a good shidduch. All of my secular friends were like, absolutely not, including my parents. Everybody was like, no, because they saw Ben with Tzitzao and they saw this guy from Lakewood. And, you know, the cultures are very different, very, very different. And at first it was really difficult.
But also Sarah had grown a lot religiously herself that a lot of people didn't see.
Right, because it was COVID. So a lot of them didn't even know my personal growth. They were like, he's making you more religious. And I was like, no, it's the opposite. Like I just chose this for myself and I met him. It was really hard. And I'm not ashamed to say I love therapy. I'm in therapy every week, have been for years. And I had to do a lot of self-work and self-reflection on like, what is this, the direction in which I'm about to take, like with Ben or without Ben. Is that my choice or is that their choice that's infiltrating in my head? And it was a really, really, really hard journey for me of realizing like, I have to make this choice for myself, even if they all say, you know, he's not for you. Because at this point, like I had to learn how to trust myself. I had done a lot of work on myself for years. And I really had learned a lot about myself, and I knew what I was looking for. And my mom actually in France 3 weeks ago, she said I was right. I didn't tell you that, but she was like, you were right. You were right. I didn't see.
No.
Yeah, she said you were right, and I didn't trust you, and I should have. And I knew what I was looking for, and it was really hard. And I think a lot of my friendships now are in a much better place. Thank God. Like I'm still friends with tons of non-Jews and tons of secular Jews, but once I was confident of like, hello, I'm making this choice for myself. You're either my friend or you're not my friend. Eventually people came around. And now, thank God, I think Ben has a great relationship with a lot of my friends. He has a great relationship with my family. But it was a journey.
It takes work, and obviously I'm on the side. It's not me going through it the same way Sarah is, but I think that for Bali Tshuva watching it, I think that one thing is for sure. You have to be confident in your decision, and you can't waver. You have to stay where you are. Don't compromise. Obviously, if there's certain circumstances where you need to ask a rabbi, of course, but overall, be who you are unapologetically.
Yeah.
And even if in the beginning it's rough, eventually almost all people will come around. And I watched that happen for Sarah, like Sarah wearing her sheitel. You could imagine how people thought about that. Keeping Shabbos 100%. And it's not easy for people. They have to plan around you, going to kosher restaurants. You live in New York City, but still, people want to go to the restaurants that they want to go to. But if you stay confident and you say, this is who I am, people will come around, and people who love you will do.
And did you have the opposite of Sarah? Did you have anyone?
Oh yeah, his friends love me. I'm just kidding.
No, I mean, my parents they loved her from the beginning. They just wanted me to be happy. Just to say it this way, the fact that I was able to get married is a huge thing. When I was in the hospital, I wouldn't have been married myself. I was extremely sick. I basically died 4 times. Wow. I was in a place where it was even a concept. So the fact that my parents and my family had seen that and seen the progression, the fact that I was able to get married to Baruch Hashem, a healthy person who just an amazing person, they were just thrilled. It wasn't about anything else for them. So
and I was actually thinking, and I wanted to ask you, while you were sick or as you were healing and battling this sickness, did you ever come to a place of fear of, what if I can't find someone because of this? Or what if I can't find someone because I'm trying to find someone, I'm dating all different people and it's not working? You never had
No,
that
I was
fear?
more curious. I was never concerned about that.
I think sorry to interrupt you. You definitely said that at the beginning, though. You didn't think you were going to get married.
Yeah. When I was extremely sick, when I was in the hospital, I didn't think I would ever get married. But once I got to a place where I was already back in society and you're active, where I was off the oxygen, I was able to walk, I was able to be independent, I knew I'd get married. I didn't know who I'd marry, and I was pretty curious, actually. I was like, I wonder who I'm going to end up with, because I traveled a lot. I knew so many different types of people. So, when you grow up in a box society and you're going to marry a similar type, it makes your choices more narrow. So again, it's not necessarily easy, but it's just different. For me, I was just all over the place. So I didn't know who, but I wasn't so concerned about it. I knew I wanted somebody that went through difficulty. It didn't matter what the difficulty was, but I needed somebody that had experienced life and had a little bit of a bumpy life, only because I needed to be able to relate. I couldn't relate to somebody, and everybody has challenges, but I'm talking about challenges that change a person.
Yeah.
That was something that I needed, And again, Sarah has her challenges, and for her, that was enough for me to be able to relate to. So
Yeah. And I like the word that you chose. I was really curious to see who I would end up with. I want to invite those listening to think, instead of feeling, how can they be out there or do they even exist, to try to exercise with creativity that choice of words like, I'm so curious to see who they are, rather than, are they even out there? I can't even imagine what they look like. I just like that choice of words. So I want to invite everyone to think about that. Wow. Thank you both for sharing your story. I'm curious to hear if there's any takeaway point that you want those listening to hear, something you want to give over from your experience that you didn't share already, if anything specific comes to mind.
I guess I'll just go first.
Yeah,
Give her some time to think. We both went through a lot, and we both went through real journeys. And even though I said that there was a time I didn't think I would be able to get married, I think that I was very fortunate to have an incredible family and incredible friends who really stood by my side and were an incredible support system for me and created a tremendous amount of positivity. And I know that I've been labeled to be toxic positivity, and to sometimes lie to myself that, I'm positive when maybe it's not positive, but that really helped me. And I see that helping a lot of people get through difficulty. That's not to say that, or to minimize that there isn't difficulty and that things are tough and, the world out there is rough, but be positive, because when you're dating, if you're dating somebody and you're negative, they're never going to want to be with you, right? If you're just always breeding negativity, nobody enjoys that. So if you have to lie to yourself to be positive, do it. Maybe that goes against what therapists might say. Could be. For me, or I would say surround yourself by positive people. So hopefully that by osmosis, that helps.
Yeah.
So that was something that really, really helped me. And I would just tell people to just stay positive and not give up. It's very difficult for sure. Everybody has times that they want to give up. So when you want to give up, make sure you're around people that keep pushing you and keep on encouraging you.
Wow, that's really powerful. And Ben's phone number is for all those seeking positivity.
My wife's number. She's a lot better than this than I am.
No, that's not true. I think I'm just gonna reiterate a little bit about what I said earlier, which is that I think that when you are out in the dating world, you look at married people and you're like, oh, they don't understand. Like, it's so hard. I just want to say, like, I understand. I dated for a long time. I got married at 27, which I thought was young, but I can understand the perspective of like, that's considered, not the youngest in the frum world. And I really know that it's tough out there. I know that. I had many, many failed relationships, dating stories. I mean, a lot of heartbreak before I met Ben. A lot of times where I felt like, is this ever going to happen for me? My friends can attest. I was constantly saying like, I just don't think I'm ever going to get married. I don't think it's in the cards for me. Like, I'm never going to meet someone. I don't want anyone to limit themselves or feel like, I just want to reiterate that the person you end up with, and I think we see that in a lot of your stories on Instagram, like it's just not who we expect. It's not, a lot of time it's not who we envision, but something might be amazing for you. And sometimes it's a little, I feel like we want to resist the things that we need. Like, again, Ben is really, really different for me. He's very calm. He doesn't panic in situations. And I resisted that a little bit because I took that as like, why don't you care as much as I do? But sometimes the person who is different from us is exactly what we need. And sometimes that opposition is so healthy for us. And so I just want to reiterate that the person you're looking for might not be exactly what you think they're going to look like or sound like, or the community that they're from. It might not be exactly what you think. So I would just say stay open-minded while still being intentional about qualities and what you think is healthy. Does that make sense?
100%.
Yeah.
And Sarah has a Instagram where she talks about her
I
bowel
haven't done it in
tube.
a long time. So.
It's
Let
incredible.
the proud husband speak,
Yes.
Sarah.
He can.
And I think it speaks to a lot of these points where they discuss it in a very, very open way. And
I think it's called like Balas Teshuva. I haven't posted on it in a long time, but it was kind of, I started this page where I just kind of wanted to be open about the Baal Teshuva journey. I think a lot of people don't realize how hard it is and how hard it can be with friends, with judgment. Can I just make one more quick point? I'll be really fast. I also want to go back to like my friends not being supportive of my relationship with Ben. I know there are many times where a friend can be in a situation that's actually not good for them. And in those situations, like I understand you might be being the good friend by saying like he's not for you. But in this case, it was different. So I think like if you're a friend and your friend's dating someone who's maybe different that you didn't expect your friend to end up with, like try and see what's triggering you about that person. Is it that they just, it's different than what you expected? Or like, is it actually unhealthy for the friend? I think in our situation, it was just not what my friends expected, but it was really healthy for me. And so that's a key differentiation.
Okay. Thank you. And
Thank you.
I really meant it when you guys walked in, like you're a disco ball of positivity and happiness. So we didn't really need lights in here. We had you guys. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your story of hope with us.
Thank you for having us.
If you want to join the Mission for Change, please share any and all feedback to soh@meaningfulminute.org. We want to hear from you. These episodes will be dropping every Sunday evening and can be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. If you have a story of hope, please let us know. We'd love to hear from you and maybe even feature you. Reach out to us at soh@meaningfulminute.org to share your story and join the Mission for Change.